this is our gaping hole, and over here we have a cardboard mock-up of what we're trying to achieve. A little box in the front to go around the shock tower, and then in the back, a little wheel well. Again, we've moved this out a little bit because, again, our tires, look how far out that thing is. Way out there. So we can gain a little bit of room by going out like that. Now, this box shape, I might change it a little bit, but because it does contact just a scooch there. So that needs a little bit more clearance. So again, this is kind of just a rough idea. I'll start building the pieces. You know, I'll start with this piece and then move on to those pieces, and then finally use that piece to tie it all together, and we'll bump it out a little bit more for clearance there. I think that'll fit in nicely. So as you can see, there were some like strengthening ribs, kind of like a bed floor would be. And I've mocked up a couple bends here off the brake. And they're not perfect, but I think if I dial it in, you know, just run those two ribs, I think that'll kind of blend in a little bit. I think that'll look nice. So I think we'll use the brake to do that. I can only get so close together with a reverse bend on the brake, so that's as tight. That's the least amount of step I can do. I could change the angle a little bit, but it does seem to match decent. So I think we'll use that and get to cutting some metal.
So I'm just cutting this piece of cardboard that was taped in place there, taking that out of the vehicle, so I can use that to put against a piece of metal, mark out a template, so I can recreate that same piece, but in steel. Now that I have a rough template cut out of steel, we'll bring that over to the brake, and we're going to bend up those bed lines, those kind of raised ridges that add a little bit of rigidity to it. So we have the ridges bent into that piece. Now I'm just going to mark out where I need to cut this piece to make it fit. Basically to go around that shock tower and around the wheel arch. I whipped up a little patch panel for the increase in length on our fender and welded that in. I'm using the shrinker here to make the top piece for the wheel arch. And then we're going to make a side piece based on the profile that we create here. This is a template for the side piece. We're just going to cut that out. Now that we have our cutout, I'm going to do a little design on here that we can bead roll. Now that I have a design, I'm going to use the bead roller to create like kind of a layered effect. Adds a little bit of rigidity and kind of a neat styling cue.
Cool.
Where we started, where we're at. These panels are in place. I have them held in place temporarily with Clecos. These little guys. Just holding them in there so we can kind of mock everything up. The wheel tub, I did weld that out. The other pieces are all removable individually. I think it looks decent. Take a look under here, check this part out. So you get a little bit of that bead roll design through the wheel well. I think that's gonna look cool. You can see there are some gaps still. You gotta trim and wiggle, you know, stuff can move around a little bit, like these gaps can be tightened up. But it's coming together. Before I fully weld out this side, I'm gonna use these pieces as templates to replicate and do a mirror image on this side. So I'm gonna get started doing that now.
So we're back over at the break, with a little bit of a better angle, showing you how we're making those creases for the bed floor. The second wheel arch, I decided to bend a flange up on both the inside and the outside. Just makes for a simpler piece to weld in, less seams to seam seal, and less areas for rust to occur. Now that I have the flanges bent, I'm going to go over to the shrinker stretcher and shrink the flange that goes on the inside, and then I'm going to stretch the flange that goes on the outside. This allows me to shape it and keep it flat. Here I am going over and stretching the other side to match the shrink that I've done. This tool just is super handy for doing stuff like this. I'm mocking it up using the other arch just to kind of match the same bend radius. One super handy part about using this setup is, say you go too far, if you're stretching, you can just go back to the other side, shrink it a little bit, and pull that radius out.
All right, I got my wheel tubs made, got the shock towers made, everything's kind of in place. You know, there's some minor gaps, you know, stuff needs to get tweaked a little bit for final welding, but I'm going to take these boxes out, kind of disassemble the whole thing, you know, finish welding out these corners, finish welding this out, and then underneath this bed floor portion, there's a couple channels that I had built earlier. And right now they're just clecoed on, but we're going to need to spot weld to that. So we're going to have to mark out on this panel, drill some holes, and then we're going to use a weld through primer on the back side and everything underneath, because I'm never going to be able to reach it again once these are welded down. I'll spray all that and then I'll be able to spot weld through the holes to get these panels in. Then we're going to be using a 2-part seam seal that's pretty rugged. It's going to make up for any areas that we're not fully welding. So a lot of progress made. You know, there's still some little holes we got to fill in here and there. But definitely coming along. Last night I did do a little bit of comp cut here. Cut this area off. So we're going to have to go in and patch that off as well. But it hung down kind of low in the way that I want to design the bumper to wrap around and give a little protection. It was in the way. See some of that wheel well action in there. Then we'll be painting the shock towers once we pull those panels out as well, because we won't be able to reach those either once everything's welded in. Cool, let's get to it. All right, ready for paint. I have all my holes here to weld through. These are actually individual pieces now, just one massive piece on both sides. So we're going to be pulling these things out, getting some primer on the areas that we won't be able to reach after welding. and then we'll be tack welding these things in.
So here I am working on the driver's side fender well. In order to use this weld through primer, you have to sand everything, get all the oils and everything that's accumulated while I've been working on these off. So I'm just going to DA everything, and then there's areas that I can't reach, so I'm going to have to hand sand those areas. Just get everything prepped and get a nice surface for that primer to adhere to. It's a pain, but it makes for a better product in the end. So the wheel tubs have now been primed and the primer is all dried. What I'm going to do now is use masking tape to create nice lines for my seam sealer to go in between. Just makes for everything to look a little bit tidier. Not necessary, but I think it makes it look pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead, tape off all the seams that I'm going to seam seal. So I have all the masking tape set out here. Now I'm going to get the seam sealer, start seam sealing within those lines. This is a 2-part seam sealer. It's pretty rugged stuff. It sets super fast. In 10 minutes you can paint it. So I'm just going to go ahead, hit all these areas, and then what I do is I take a small brush and smooth it out. You see the tails on some of the tape are kind of long. I left those so once I've got everything seam sealed and brushed, then I can go back and have something to grab onto to peel the tape off. Just makes it a little bit easier. There is something super satisfying about peeling off the tape and leaving behind those nice crisp lines. Love it.
All right, beautiful. We have the inside of both wheel tubs seam sealed. We already zinc primered, of course. And now, because of the location of the shock tower here, it's gonna block this area from being able to be painted later. So I'm gonna do a little bed liner on the inside here, just in this area where I can't reach it, once it's on the vehicle. I don't want to go out here because those areas are going to get welded. This wheel area here is going to get welded. This is going to be welded. So I want to avoid those areas, but any places I'm not going to be able to reach with paint or coating after the fact, I'm going to hit it now.
Super speedy spray paint! Alright, it's bed liner. Now we've got everything bed lined that we needed to. It wouldn't be accessible. And I'm going through and filling all those holes that I created so I can weld to the cross members, and I'm welding the inner fenders to the existing structure from the inside, from the outside, just hitting it up in a bunch of locations to make sure it's nice and stiff, lining up the ends of that panel, kind of tweaking those before I weld them, and just tacking everything in place, making sure nothing's moving anywhere. Now that we have the panels welded in, I'm going to go ahead and do that same seam sealer treatment, which is kind of satisfying to watch. It's a lot better than actually doing it, I'll tell you that right now.
Finally, we're all seam sealed, we're primered, and everything fits. The seat pivots nicely. We've got just enough clearance there. Looks great. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to be using in here. I'm going to be probably like an industrial bed liner of some sort. Might have it done commercially. Not sure yet, but everything's sealed off. Real nice. On the inner wheel wells, because I had to coat behind here in order to have that area ever be coated because it's blocked now. I did use a spray-in bed liner just to, You know, probably not as industrial as a commercial one, but it'll at least coat it for now. I may do something over the top of that, but everything's black in there. I think that looks pretty good. You can see the bead roll details in the wheel well. Came out awesome. Very pleased. To the both of you that watched all the way to the end, I appreciate it. I know that these wheel wells may not be the most interesting part of the build, but it's something that we had to get done, so I figured I'd show you the process and how I tackled it. Looking forward to doing some more fab stuff, maybe a little more interesting. Doing the fuel cell, got the front steering to situate as well. So follow along, and thanks for watching.